I'm currently on the outskirts of Laredo, Texas. And it's kind of hard to believe, but almost 100 years ago, just a few miles that way, across the Rio Grande, Mexico was engulfed in a revolution. A revolution that saw the old regime thrown out and being replaced with the constitutionalists. Now, scholarship into the Mexican Revolution has really expanded, especially in the latter half of the 20th century. Starting from the 1960s all the way up into the 1980s, you saw huge interest in the Mexican Revolution and its history, especially outside of the Mexican territory. Now, residents here in Laredo and across all of Texas were greatly vested in the outcome of the Mexican Revolution. Okay, that was a little extra, I know, and I'm sorry. I was just testing some things out. Probably not all my discussion videos are going to be like that. I just thought it would be fun to open the discussion video like a 1950s Mexican movie, and I just decided to get a little creative. I'm sorry. Like I said, it probably won't happen again. But the main meat of this video, which is about the Mexican Revolution, because I ended up choosing two dissertations, one by Jose Luis Ramos, which was in the credit titles. There was the first article featured in the credit titles, and then the second article is actually Fanaticos, and that is written by Julian Dodson. And I chose those two articles for a reason, because as I was going through my master's and I was looking for topics to do for the thesis, I ended up choosing the Mexican Revolution and how Texas was involved in the Mexican Revolution. I was just kind of been interested in my my culture, my heritage, and where I come from. And I know that was kind of in the articles that we were reading about how students usually choose their dissertation topics based on, their region that they're coming from. And I've really had a profound appreciation for my heritage and for my local history, something that was never really there when I was younger. So now it's kind of nice to have that. So I chose these two articles by Dodson and by Ramos. I thought they were very interesting because Ramos chooses to look at the end of the revolution, because the official end of the Mexican Revolution happens around 1919, 1920. That is the time when Huerta and his forces are gone. Porfirio Diaz is long gone by that time. And you have this revolving door and this consolidation of power between the constitutionalist forces. Because, yes, even though they were united, the constitutional forces were united to fight off the dictator Diaz, they also had to kind of fight amongst themselves for power because of Mexico history. But once they get rid of Huerta, now they're vying for power, and you start to see the assassination of Emilio Zapata and Pancho Villa and other Mexican generals like Lucio Blanco. And so the party of the revolution, or the PRI, they start consolidating power, and so they really solidify their hold on Mexico around 1919. And so Ramos is writing his dissertation, and he's looking at the relationship between the United States and Mexico in those years after the revolution, when the United States is actually trying to they're trying to make amends and make peace, and they're finally in a stance where they can put the troubles that they've had with Mexico behind them and start a good relationship, and a relationship that is based on trade. And so Ramos really looks into that, and he kind of opens up with a brief history of the relation between the United States and Mexico. And that kind of goes a little bit more into the Civil War also. But he's looking at the progressive era and how that's affecting. He's also looking into imperialism and anti-imperialism between the two countries. And he also kind of looks at that like restriction of immigration. And he kind of ends there with that. And then he talks about the culture and art. That was also very interesting. Now, methodology, he is looking at primary sources. The majority of his primary sources, however, come from Mexico. But I feel like he does have a good balance between of primary sources from the United States and from Mexico. And he's got a long list of secondary sources, which at first, when I was looking at it, I was kind of concerned because I would have assumed he would have had more primary sources. But I guess because the Mexican Revolution is something that has been studied since the 1930s and onwards, there really is no point in regurgitating the same old thing. So I guess in that case, it's okay to have a long list of secondary sources. But his primary sources, I would have expected him to have a bit more lengthy primary sources. But let me go ahead and pull this up just so I can show you. So he does have more. No, actually, no. He does have more sources coming from the U.S. than he does from Mexico. But I really like that his Mexican primary sources are coming from the Archivo General de la Nación, or the National Archives, or their equivalent of the National Archives. And from there, he's pulling from several files, and that's where he's compiling the majority of his information. But he's got other sources, other databases that he's tapping into. He's going into the Archivo Histórico de la Secretaría de Salud. I believe that's how you say it. I'm sorry, I probably butchered that. But he's also, tapping into Biblioteca de Miguel Lerros de Tejaredo. And so he's really diversifying his primary sources and pulling from a good number of them. And from the United States, he's pulling from the Library of Congress. He's pulling from the Rockefeller Archive Center. So really, I feel like he's got a good hold of his primary sources. And of course, he has a good mixture of newspapers as sources as well. He's pulling from the Los Angeles Times. He's pulling from the New York Times, the Washington Post, but he's also pulling from Mexican newspapers like El Excelsior and El Universidad. So he's got a good, like I said, he's got a good mixture of both, and I really like that. When it comes to Fanaticos, Dodson also has a similar methodology when he's approaching this. He's gonna be relying on heavy secondary sources, and with his primary sources, he is also looking in at newspapers. He's also going into El Universidad and Excelsior, but he's also looking at the San Antonio Light. He's also, which is a Texas newspaper. He's looking into the New York Times, but he's looking into the Douglas Daily Dispatch. He's looking at Christian Science Monitor. So he's really also kind of looking at what Ramos had put out. I chose Dodson's paper because he's looking at something that often gets overlooked, and that's the exiles of the Mexican Revolution that were living in the United States. And oftentimes the United States, Texas majorly, was being used as like headquarters and a place where the Mexican government couldn't reach them, where they thought they couldn't reach them. And that's where they were planning their attacks, and they were planning revolts and everything, and then they would jump back into Mexico and then act on those. Lucio Blanco, which was a general for the Mexican Revolution, that ended up happening to him. He was in exile here in San Antonio, was organizing to overthrow Obregon's government, I believe, and he gets caught in the crossfire. He ends up dead in the riverbanks. Um, but that's why I chose those two papers. Really, really enjoyed looking into the databases and looking at the plethora, uh, the plethora of um, dissertations on this topic. It's a topic I'm very interested in. I'm hoping to do my dissertation on the relationship between Mexico and the United States during the revolution, and I want to build on my thesis for my dissertation. But that's what I have. I hope I nailed everything on the um, for the assignment, and I will see you all next time. Thanks, guys.